So my name's Thomas Rickard. I do live in the UK. I live down in the southwest, and I am the interim coordinator of the UK Rights of Nature Network, and I have been for the last couple of months. The network is a couple of years old, a group of lawyers, academics, artists, activists, but you can learn more about that. I'll send links to all these kind of materials. Today, I'm going to do a brief overview of what's happening in the UK with some examples, and just say a little bit in the beginning about what is nature-centric governance. So, why in the first place? So we know that there are ongoing crises in biodiversity, climate. These are linked, of course, to other issues: food, housing, energy, transport, and these shocks are likely to get worse. So we need to think about how we change our governance to respond to this. Nature-centric governance has the potential to complement our existing approaches. So, of course, we already do have conservation, we have ecological sciences, we have landscape planning. So this just might add another tool to our kit. And there is growing legal and applied basis showing that this can work. So what is it? This is a definition I've put together. Definitions will vary, but the one I've put together here, we're talking about law and institutions that are just fundamentally recognize our ecological reality, our ecological limits of the world that we live in. We're not owners of landscape or of species. They're not resources. We are members of a community, even though we might still eat, some of the plants and animals here. It's a different attitude. So we do have rights, but there are also limits and duties towards nature. So this isn't quite environmental law or environmental social governance or ecology. Got nothing, no issue with any of those, but there is something distinct about this. And it's important to note that we're trying to bring something different because nature, in this perspective, is a legal, moral, political subject. It has a seat at the table. It has a voice in our decision making. And there is a focus too in this, not just on tweaking this law or that structure, but on whether we can innovate. There are examples of changed constitutions. We don't have a constitution as such in this country. There are also attempts at bioregional governance forums. There are guardians. So it's looking at new ways of doing things as well as adjusting the old. This on the right is a kind of symbol of an eco-centric perspective where humans aren't on top of a hierarchy. So I won't go into detail on the history of rights of nature, the classic cases in Ecuador, New Zealand, other countries, but suffice to say that it is growing rapidly over the last 10, 15 years, all over the world, multiple national cases, a lot of sub-national cases, municipal or related to particular rivers or natural entities. And the UK in the last few years has also picked up on this idea. So we've seen local authority declarations, district or borough councils, normally around rivers, but also around trees. We've seen catchment partnerships take this up. We've seen community river organisations gather around rights of nature concepts, discourse. We've seen nature on the board, and we've seen networks evolve like the Rights of Nature Network and the River Rights Network. So I'm going to give you a few cases. We've seen recently a UK Rights of Nature bill proposed in the House of Lords. So this was Green Party and Baroness Natalie Bennett with the NGO Nature's Rights, proposing new bioregional governance forums, new duties on business and government. It has almost no chance of progressing, but it's just a notable moment for rights of nature when this gets brought up in the House of Lords. And we'll see how this bill evolves and develops. More advanced, I would say, is district and borough council, city council motions. So the most advanced case is Lewes District Council down there in the southeast. In 2023, they passed a motion to explore a river rights charter. So they worked slowly, they worked through consensus, they spoke to people in the community, they spoke to stakeholders up and down the river to build consensus towards a 2025 motion to accept the rights of the River Ouse. And now they are, again, moving carefully and slowly with an Ouse symposium looked at implementation recently with about 58 people, 35 organizations, to just explore what this can mean, because there's no point passing a council motion or a law if you don't have everybody with you making sense together of what this means. So there are also motions passed in Dean and Basingstoke, Wealdon, Maidstone, and for Southampton City. And so just to flesh it out a bit, river rights to what? River rights to exist in their natural state, to flow, to perform essential natural functions, to feed and be fed from sustainable aquifers, to be free from pollution, to native biodiversity, to regeneration and restoration, and this is distinct too, to an active and influential voice. And you may be thinking, well, there are already laws and protections in place for each of these, for pollution, for biodiversity, for natural functions. So why would we have a river rights charter? Well, these laws and demands and regulations are distributed across different organizations and people. And this river rights charter has that potential to just center the river and its particular needs in different conversations, so that different decision-making bodies have a very clear sense of what their duties to the river can be. Whether it can move to be a material consideration in planning, that's still to be tested. So moving on to nature on the board, which we'll hear more about today. So I don't want to go into too much detail, but the example I've chosen is Faith in Nature because it is the pioneer example in the UK. They changed their Articles of Association in 2022 with support of Lawyers for Nature, Environmental Law, Earth Law Centre. So Nature sits on the board as a director. They can draw on experts, they have a vote, they have to be present for quorum, and some of the results, so Faith in Nature trying to report the results of this director for nature, from what I can read, and we'll hear more, have changed, some changes in sourcing, packaging, research, and cultural shifts. And so there are other businesses taking this up, such as House of Hackney in London and the Better Business Network. So if we think about that director for nature on a company board, that's also been the inspiration for taking this to catchment partnerships. So Tom Johnston being our pioneer example there in Wales, I thought he gets enough attention, so I'll showcase the River Wye in my presentation. So earlier this year, they created a working group, the Wye Catchment Partnership, to recruit Dr. Louise Bodnar, who is an ecologist, among other things. And who did they look for? They put out a job description on the right here. Someone who cares about the river, understands the science, has a strong, balanced sense of what needs to be done, will not politicize, is a skilled advocate, has knowledge of existing legislation, and can work constructively with others. So it was a 2-year fixed term. She has voting rights, there's no veto. If there's an unresolvable conflict, the role can be terminated. And she's been using this as a platform for internal advocacy, just reminding people to consider the river's needs in meetings, criticising planning from this perspective, but also external advocacy. When I spoke to her last, she wanted to take school kids to look at food sourcing in supermarkets as the voice of the River Wye. So she's taking on a kind of advocation role for the river beyond the catchment partnership. So we do see river/nature guardians in the Roding in London, the Usk in South Wales, and we also have Elspeth Jones on the National Infrastructure Commission for Wales. So she's been doing a 6-month pilot as a nature guardian there. And again, at the moment we have anecdotes, that this can shift the conversation in the room. It can change the ordering and emphasis in reports. It can change the experts that are called on to respond to certain questions. And then we have methods, which we'll hear about this case later today, but to give you a sense of it, interspecies assemblies, well, in this case, this is an interspecies council. I should have edited this slide. The picture here in the case is an interspecies council on the DEFRA land use consultation. So earlier this year, DEFRA put out a consultation on their new land use plan. And we gathered, not me, but Moral Imaginations, Weird Futures and Feedback, invited some environmental professionals, conservationists, artists as well, to represent different species. So before the event, people are assigned a being, so they'd be oak, mayfly, bat, river, soil, cow, chicken, and they're invited to imagine themselves as this being, using scientific ecological knowledge too, but empathy, imagination too, and to think about the land use framework in a council forum like this that you can see in the picture, just speaking from this perspective. And then on particular themes, we deliberated, what are the trade-offs between agriculture, development, nature? What are the scales of planning over time, over space, governance issues, who is included, principles of operation. So as these species, we tried to interrogate the policy, and we came up with specific recommendations that were included in a formal response to the DEFRA land use consultation. I don't think they're going to adopt them, but what it shows is that we're testing and refining these methods for changing our perspective when we think about policy and decision making. There have been interspecies councils too on freshwater planning and the roading catchment partnership that included people from DEFRA. There was an assembly of river beings on the River Exe. There was an interspecies democracy exercise in Southampton. This is more kind of theatrical exercise, but it just shows this broad interest in what happens when we just try and imagine ourselves as these beings with which we interact. So in summary, there is a growing and diverse UK movement around the world, and in the UK, we see projects for rights, representation on the boards of companies, representation on catchment partnerships, and we see these methods such as interspecies councils. So they're innovative, they're promising, and they have good feedback so far, but this is still very much an experimental stage. So I don't want to suggest that we have strong evidence that these are going to transform the way we govern. At this point, we have a few cases. We have enough of a basis to say that it's worth exploring this more. And, the UK Rights of Nature Network, the River Rights Network, Tom there, and other connected organisations, we have a confidence that there is something here worth exploring, but we need rigorous research to compare and assess impact of these different interventions. So catchment partnerships and protected landscapes do appear to be suitable forums. They are bioregional, they're focused on nature, and they're multi-stakeholder, and they have this outward look to participation. And in some of them, at least, there is a flexibility to try different things out. And there is an advantage, I'd say now, for anyone wanting to try this, is that we do have this accumulated set of cases, of people, of methods that have been tried out in other places. And many of us that are very happy to have these conversations just to explore what it could mean for your particular forum.